tea, man.
All right. Let's get this shit started. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed our previous episode with our good friend, Mr. Whitey. And guess what? He's back today.
Hey.
And without further ado, I want to just jump into it and welcome to the podcast for the very first time, the one and only Mr. Tommy Chong. How you doing, Tommy?
Hey, thank you, Barry. Thank you for the clap. Appreciate it. I'm doing great, man. I'm doing really good. Every day to me is a gift. When you get a certain age, just waking up is a triumph. For sure. And that's the way I am. I couldn't be, but my life couldn't be better.
Yeah, and I really want to thank you for being on. You've been really busy. I mean, I think you've been doing a lot of rounds on the podcast and everything, on all kinds of different podcasts from what I've seen and whatnot. How do you have that energy, man? I'm like not even 40 and I'm feeling, beat up these days,
Well, that's all. Basically all I got to do, really. I'm, I guess not retired, but I'm not working as much. And that's what really retirement really is. Mm-hmm. I tell people I do a lot of cameos, and I tell people, when they're retired, if you're not careful, you work harder than you ever have in your life. Because when you got a job, at least there's a time when you say, okay, I quit work. Right. But when you're retired, there's no cutoff, except, he's gone to bed, don't bother him. So I've been busy. I've been enjoying my life, mm-hmm. I do a lot of podcasts because I'm at that age now where no one really listens to you, in the family, and so when you get someone say, "Hey, we want to hear what you have to say," you jump at that chance.
For sure, yeah. Now, I want to talk to you about a good number of things. I know we can't fit everything in, but I obviously don't want to do like a whole like retrospective of your career. It spans 7 decades. There's so much to talk about. But I do want to pick out a few topics. I definitely want to talk about the music. I want to talk about what worked with Cheech. And then I have my good friend Whitey here to be my cannabis counsel, since I'm a little ignorant in that area, but he's the knowledgeable one there. So why do you have anything you want to immediately jump in with to start us off?
No, I've been working in the marijuana industry for like 5 years now, and I've seen the business grow, and I'm kind of interested to see what Tommy hopes that the country does about the cannabis industry as a whole. They weren't able to accept money before, like in the banks and things like that. And
we're slowly coming back to what used to be the norm, which is years ago, cannabis was never illegal, and it was considered a medicine, back in the day, and America, with its racist beginning and its racist history, it just included cannabis right off the bat, with its laws, its racist laws. And it went from one racist law that didn't work called prohibition, because that was just a law against all the immigrants coming to America, and because the immigrants, when they came from Europe, they brought their alcohol, because back in Europe, the water was so unsafe to drink. So people just got used to drinking alcohol, and and just having alcohol. Yeah, not everybody, but it was more than a custom. It was their way of life, and so the Germans brought the beer, Italians and the French brought the wines, and Scandinavians brought the Skol, got the and the Russians brought the vodka, And so the Puritan Americans, you know, they railed against it. You know, it's against God. God doesn't want you, blah blah blah. And so we got prohibition. Well, when prohibition fell apart, and prohibition really fell apart when people started electing people of color, and not people of color, but people of different nationalities. You know, the Italians and so on. When they got in political power, you see, and then prohibition took a dive, but the law enforcement, it was a cash cow for it. Prohibition was a cash cow on every, you know, the graft and the bribery and all the stuff that went on with prohibition. You know, that's what created the gangsters. You know, Al Capone and them. And so then when prohibition ended, they looked around for something else, and they found marijuana, because then marijuana was mostly used by black people. And you know, like cocaine was introduced to the black to the slaves, actually, to make them more productive, to get them working harder, longer hours than that. So that's where cocaine came in, and then marijuana was the prohibition against Mexicans. You know, because, and that's why they called it marijuana. You know, up until then it was hemp, and hemp was legal. Not only legal, but it was designated as a necessity during the wars, and so all this racist bullshit, which is still going on, you know, on a different level, different prohibitions. You know, I was watching a show about Elvis Presley, his early beginnings. So I loved it, because that's what attracted me to Elvis, was his attitude and his singing. But Elvis gained his fame from singing black songs that talked about sex. You know, it was just pure sex. And then when he got on stage and wiggled his legs and, you know, and simulated, he was just imitating all the black performers before him that he had seen in Mississippi and that. And so this racist thing, you know, was very, very huge, still is, the racism. And I love your ignorance is strength. I know that's the tongue in cheek, because you have to be strong if you're that stupid. You know?
Well, for me too, it's just, you know, I like to talk to people about things I don't know about. You know, it's a play off of that as well. I mean, I loved you know, George Orwell's 1984, so it's all of those things. But back to, you know, marijuana. You know, I'm one of these kids. I was born in the 80s. You know, I grew up in the 90s, and I was, you know, with the mindset of that whole just say no thing. You know, dare to say no to drugs. And you know, the funny thing though is that the battle always seemed to be against marijuana. It was, I didn't know what meth was. I didn't know about prescription pills. You know, I maybe heard of cocaine, but everything seemed to be against marijuana. And as I grew up, I started thinking like, well, wait a minute, everybody's doing this. And I started working in schools. I'm like, the principal's smoking, the superintendent smoking, you know, all the teachers are. And, you know, I never really understood, like, you know, the hypocrisy there until I started seeing it.
That's funny you say that, because like the first time I went to the dispensaries, you see all these like you see so many people sitting in the waiting room, like you're like, wait, this isn't the guy that's supposed to be here, you know?
Yeah, when they legalized it in Colorado, I was at the opening at this one dispensary in Pueblo. Was it Pueblo? Anyway, in Colorado. And what I noticed was that it looked like a lineup waiting to be healed by Jesus. You know, they're on the crutches, they're in wheelchairs, they were, you know, they were people that had illnesses that can only be treated with cannabis, and that's who was lined up. I don't think there was a hippie among them, because this is what I told the people before. You know, is that cannabis is such a gift from God that it will grow anywhere, in any condition, for anybody. it's hard to screw up a cannabis plant. I've people grow it accidentally. You know, they throw their seeds outside, and next thing you know, they got a hedge of cannabis plants. It will grow anywhere, and it does. And the harder the conditions, the stronger the plant is. And so it really is a gift. It's the burning bush that Moses talked. You know, God appeared to Moses in the form of a burning bush. Well, I would do that on stage, but it's so true. It's so true, and it's mentioned. Cannabis is mentioned all through the Bible. And by the way, I've been really focusing my, you know, my intellect toward the spiritual side of us, and it's so amazing when you look at read the books in the Bible, you know, when you read people that have, you know, could decipher the Bible, because the Bible was written in code, you know, and then it's been translated over the years. But the truth that's written in the Bible, of course, you know, the preachers in that, you know, they kind of add a lot of stuff to it, but the truth is in every sentence in the Bible. That's why the Bible is such a pop, you know, they say it's the greatest piece of literature ever written, and it's spawned more TV shows and novels and books than any other form of books. And so the Bible is so full of truth, but you have to be able to understand the code words in that. And so I've been reading all the books. The one I'm got now is by Joel S. Goldsmith. It's called The Master Speaks. And he's on the line here, Joel S. Goldsmith. So if you want to, Joel is a Jewish, non-practicing Jew from New York. He's gone now, you know, but he gave a series of lectures. He never wrote anything down. He just did a series of lectures, and he had some followers record them, and then they put out all these books that he had. He's got quite a few of these books out from his lectures, and his lectures were divinely inspired. And so I've been studying that. And you, by the way, you know who else was reading this before he died? It was Elvis Presley.
Huh.
Yeah, there's a thing in one of the Elvis's entourage. They wrote a book, and they said Elvis was deep into. I believe it was Goldsmith, one of the prophets, anyway. And you'll find a lot of really talented, great people. They've been privy to these books. Now, in the book, these books that I read, they insist that you don't try to gain any kind of monetary response for this. You know, like a lot of the preachers, you know, they do it for the money and the fame and the fortune, and it's very dangerous when you go down that route, because you know, what you're doing is you're selling people their birthright, you know, what they have anyway, you know, and you're making money off it. But then again, I read another thing on the Bible that I've been trying to adhere to, and it's judge not. Yeah, and so I've been trying to keep away from the judgmental side of everything, and where I'm at that age now where it's live and let live, because people have to go through all these changes in order to evolve, and being ignorant and being racist is just part of the ignorant side of things, you know. And so that's why we've been taught, you know, in the Bible especially, you know, to love thy neighbor. It doesn't say love thy neighbor except, no, there's no exceptions. It just says love thy neighbor, and everything is your neighbor, by the way. the trees, the plants, the birds, the wild animals. That's your neighbor. And who your neighbor is really who you're sharing this moment of consciousness that you're exploring. That's your neighbor. And so that's where I've been. And that's one of the reasons I've been on a lot of podcasts, because I'm at that age now. It's kind of funny. I'm at that age where the family really don't give a shit about what you got to say.
Right.
Nobody really cares.
They're like, I heard this one already, right?
There's grandpa, and I tell people now, my cameos, take advantage of that. And I have, I got my own room, I got my own television, I got my own office, I got man caves everywhere, because, oh, you're going to leave grandpa alone? Grandpa's going to enjoy the shit out of this, man.
Well, we appreciate it for sure. I wanted to touch on a couple of things there, definitely, and thank you for that wisdom. It is about live and let live. Just my biggest thing is just don't be a dick. Be nice to people. If you're nice to people, that's going to be reciprocated, right? I get a lot of times I get a lot of like unexpected love back from people, right? When things happen to me, like, I was hospitalized recently, so many people reached out, and it's just because and I asked somebody like, why are these people like so nice to me? Why are they giving me all this love and whatnot? They're like, well, you're good people. They're like, you treat everybody nicely, you do things for people and you never ask for anything back. And I was taken back by that, and it resonated with a lot of what you just said right now. So I definitely can get on board with that. Now you also mentioned, the Bible being, basically the center of most stories, right? I'm like, that's so true. Everything kind of takes, bites a little bit off from the Bible. Most of the stories end up on The Simpsons, which you were on, by the way. Right. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about the entertainment world, just shifting gears. I wanted to, again, not go through a whole Wikipedia of your career, but you broke into entertainment through music, right? That's what I've been reading about and looking into. Also the comedy and everything, but I was really interested to see that you were a pretty successful musician before, acting and comedy. How did that come about? And Whitey over here too, he was looking things up, and he noticed a few interesting stories as well.
Yeah, I was wondering, when did you pick up the guitar, and do you remember your first song?
Oh, listen, it wasn't the guitar playing was a result of being in the country. And when you live in the country and you're not that poor, we were quite poor, not in spirit for sure, very rich in spirit, but we never had a lot of things. I found out later, the big secret in my family was that we were part Native. My mother was a quarter Native, and I just found that out just recently from the DNA thing. And so my early childhood, I was really like a living on a reservation with outdoor plumbing, the well down the street, or the street down the road, half a mile down the road, where we had to take a little red wagon and pump our water to fill up the buckets and then bring it back, and that would be for the daily use. So these were chores that we did every day. And so my mother, when she was pregnant with me, she bought a real cheap $5 guitar, $15 guitar from Sears. And she always had it in the house. Now she took a couple of lessons, and she used to hold it against her tummy when I was in the tummy, and she would strum it. And that, whether with that had anything to do with it, but when I was a baby, I heard my uncle, who was also a fur trapper, and we were up at his cabin. And like I said, growing up poor, my dad joined the army, and during the Second World War. And so when he traveled around, we traveled with him. There was no home to stay at. Wherever Dad went, that was our home. And so so we did a lot of traveling, and my mother, like I said, was part native, and so she had a large family, and we would visit all these families, but they were all faking like they weren't native because they were all half native, and so they stayed on that on the white side, except until my mother married my dad, who was Chinese, and so some of the family, they put us down, but so we were very poor. I had the guitar, and I never played it. It was hanging up, we're laying in the side of the in the house there. But when I was about, I guess, 8, 9, I don't know. I was quite young, 8, 7, 7, 8, 9. We would go visit my cousin. They weren't really by blood cousin, but Chinese people. When they migrated into Canada, no one spoke Chinese at the immigration thing, and so you could get a lot of people in saying they're your uncle. So everybody in China is in Canada were related at one time, even though they weren't really. And so my uncle, I had an uncle and a Chinese uncle, and he married a Ukrainian woman, and they adopted a son. His name was Winky, and he had the best bedroom. Like he was 16, he was a teenager, and we were young guys, my brother and I, and so we'd go over, and I would just hang out in his bedroom. And he had a 12 bass accordion, and I just loved that accordion. I would play it, just did pick out tunes. And I found out I had a ear for music. And so then my neighbor across the way who played fiddle, he needed a guitar player. And so I knew enough about guitar to learn more. And so he taught me a few chords. And next thing you know, I'm playing a backup guitar for the fiddle player. And so I learned all those tunes, and I learned how to keep time, and I learned stamina. That was a big thing, because you're playing a party. It's not like you're playing one tune for the kids or the folks, and thank you. No, I was there
You're playing
hour
hours, yeah.
pounding that guitar, and so I became quite proficient as a rhythm guitar player. And I had no really aspirations to learn the guitar until I turned about, I guess, 13, 14. And then, I've been riding a bike now ever since I was 7, 8 years old. And so I found a guitar teacher, and I put the guitar on my back and get on my bike, and I pedal to the teacher. And I took about a couple of months. To give you an idea, the lessons cost 25 cents a lesson. That's how much you charge, 25 cents a lesson.
Man.
Yeah, multiply that by 1,000 now, right?
Yeah.
I learned. Then he taught me, and he taught me. I could have went into the jazz, and thing, but I've been trained to be a rhythm guitar player, and so even though I learned music, I learned how to the notes and everything. I learned all that, and then I went to Army Cadets, and I started. In Army Cadets, I met another native who was a singer. He ended up being an Elvis Presley imitator, and and I was his backup guitar player. We met in camp in Vernon, BC, and then to give you an idea of how I am. I took the first time I went to Army Cadet Camp, which was a 6-week course. I took my accordion with me, but I never opened it because I never felt comfortable about playing for people, because I played for myself, but not for anybody else. And like a dog chews a bone, But the guitar player, the native, Dick Bird was his name. He found out I could play guitar, so he and I never owned a guitar. I never owned a guitar until I actually started the band and I was playing a acoustic, a borrowed acoustic. Whenever I, the fiddle player had a guitar hanging in his thing, and I had the cheap guitar that my mother, I still got it. It's right here. Had to redo it, but that was the only guitar I had, was the one that my mother had, was acoustic, and so I played that rhythm right up until we started a rock and roll band, and then I bought my first guitar. But I was always rhythm, and I was always backup, like Keith Richards. You know, that's what Keith did with Mick, and that's what I did with everybody I was with. The only difference between Keith and I was that, you know, he made superstardom with Mick, and he kept at it. But with me, the singers weren't that great. You know, they got so far. They were always like, the one singer I was with, he was a football player, football star. And because he was black and we're in Canada, you know, it didn't matter that he didn't have a very strong voice. He could sing, but he never had a singing voice, you know, not that great. And he wasn't trained. He was a football player, you know, more than anything. And so that was, and then when I started backing up singers, I also developed like a writing. I could write. I instinctively knew what songs that he should sing. You know, he should sing. I never sang with him, but well, of course, he only sang the hit parade songs that were on the hit parade. But it was after I got with the black the band, and then we started playing rhythm and blues. Then we started getting some serious backup musicians, and that's where I learned my music. You know, that's where. But I've been like a journeyman rhythm guitar player. You know, it's like a ditch digger. You know, I learned how to dig that ditch. You know, I learned how to use that shovel.
Yeah.
And that's what it was with me. It was always, especially when I started getting the first gig I got as a guitar player, I never played. What happened? This guy had a supper club in Calgary, and he needed a bartender. And so instead, he hired me as a guitar player. But he said, "Will you do me a favor? Before you play, would you help with the bar?" And I said, "Sure."
Oh man.
I don't think I played. I don't think I played a note. My dad had to drop me off because I couldn't drive in that. And it was like my first guitar playing gig, and I never even played. So yeah, I and that freed me up, by the way, because when you get attached to a guitar, it owns you, you know, and that's it. It doesn't matter what thing you have. It's your guitar playing that's taking you wherever you're going to go. And if you can solo and you can do good, like all these acts, you know, they know. Well, go back to the Beatles days. You know, when the Beatles started, you know, they had everything except a good drummer. But the word went out. You know, they were that good that the best drummer would appear. And that's an old religious thing, by the way. When the pupil is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, and I really wanted to ask about the music because actually Whitey and I were in a band as well. We, you know, kind of similar to what you were saying, you know, we grew up, you know, pretty poor, you know. Our parents didn't let us know it because they, you know, they gave us as much as they could. But yeah, we kind of started off the same way you mentioned, you know, not having a guitar. I was Whitey's drummer. I didn't have a drum set till I was an adult.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
You borrow and whatever. Hey, he's got a set, or you make makeshift. You know, like you know the old basses with a string and a wash tub, and yeah, make a noise. You know that phrase Bo Diddley? You know the name Bo. You know what a Bo Diddley is?
No, I was like, I never understood it.
Okay, a Bo Diddley is, you know, the slaves down the south. They weren't, you know, some of them brought their skill. They brought nothing else. And so in order to get that Eastern or African sound, they would stretch a wire across a barn or a house somehow, and they nail a wire with a bridge and you know, and then fasten it on the other side. It was like this one string, and they would beat it with
Like a bow. Yeah.
with a thing, you know, beat it or play with it, and that was called a Bo Diddley.
Huh.
And that's where Bo Diddley got his name. They'd
Nice.
make yeah, you make music with whatever you can find, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did, you know. That's why, you know, the Western thing with the spoons, they get some spoons out there or wash something to make a rhythm, you know. And I played when I played music for the parties. That party, I mean, that was some serious shit. They would dance, the chachiche and all these dances, you know, that's what kept the country people going. As long as you had your party at the end of the week, you know, you could put up with all that hardship and that thing, because, you know, at the end of the week, wahoo, and then you're dancing and you get
you're going to be entertained. Yeah.
That energy and your women, you know, you got men, women, everything. I've been playing, and that kept me from drinking, by the way, because when I was a kid, they would, hey, give the kid a beer. And it tasted so bad for a kid, you know. It wasn't give the kid a 7-Up, but you know, you notice how the way. See, back in my day, being poor, and that was like a reward, you know. And we would have to, like, if we wanted to get candy or something, we had to collect beer bottles, any kind of bottles, and take them to the store, turn them in, get a few cents, and then buy our little licorice or candy or, you know, whatever we wanted. You know that when I was a kid, I used to buy fruit. Every once in a while they'd have, because I lived in Canada, and they would have a bowl of crab apples for a couple of cents a piece, you know, or because in Canada that there's no apple trees. And, oh man, yeah, I love fruit. That was my candy. But you know, and I realize now that the poverty was what made me, you know, people say, you're so successful and blah, blah, blah. You know, how did you do it? I did it because I had to.
Right. Yeah.
I had to. There was no one, you know, I wasn't inheriting anything, you know.
Yeah, you had to make it work. Yeah.
When my daddy died, all I got was a loan. All he left me was a loan.
I think when my parents go, all I'm going to have is their debt. So we'll see
Yeah,
where
I think
that
we're
goes.
in the same boat. Yeah.
But it gets you out of bed. What I found out is that I was blessed with poverty. Blessed. And you know, even later on in my career, when we did Up in Smoke, all of a sudden, you know, we made it. Oh, it's a movie. Boom. Yeah, you know, everybody loves it. It's a big hit. Cheech and I were broke when we finished that movie, because we hadn't worked live. We never really got paid anything decent with the movie. And here we are with a hit movie, and we have to hustle. We have to get out and start doing our live show.
You're saying that after the movie was released, you were still broke?
That's more broke.
Oh my God.
We weren't touring all the time of the movie. And that was our money. That's how we made money, was touring. And then you know, making movies. If you don't, you know, if you're not on the receiving end of the paycheck, you know, there's a lot of ways that money can disappear, and it disappeared. But it was a blessing because it kept us working. And that's what poverty does, man. You know, it keeps you working on that. Other than that, like now I'm getting into the stages where I got to spend it. You know, I can't just, you know, hoard it.
Yeah.
And what I do, I ignore it. And that's good and bad. I've been ripped off a few times, but I don't know, because I didn't know. You know, got ripped off from the bank. I didn't know. No one come in my pocket took it, you know. But I realize it's a blessing.
Yep.
You know, it's a blessing. It keeps me doing this here.
Yeah, it gives you that drive, you know, and I can definitely, you know, relate to that because here I am at age, you know, 36, and I grew up poor, always, you know, living crappy apartment to crappy apartment, thinking in my head like, man, we're never gonna have anything that's ours, and you know, I'm a homeowner, you know, and I'm ahead of the game with as a homeowner, you know, when it comes to like a lot of my friends and whatnot, and so you know that's because I've been working since I could work. You know, I've just never taken days off. And you're right, it is a blessing because it gives you that drive, that extra spark to just, you know, just go, just move. You have to.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned, you know, and I was going to get into this, but you did mention, you know, Up in Smoke and you know the whole Cheech and Chong thing, and now coming from the community that Whitey and I grew up in Almani, you know, we you know, I kind of relate your Cheech and Chong's movies to kind of like the Bond movies, right? Where it's like there's another one, another one, another one. And we didn't know the Bond movies. We knew, you know, Up in Smoke. We knew the Cheech and Chong movies, right? That
Yeah.
really hit with our community, you know, mostly Hispanic community.
Sure.
And what was it about, you know, the combination of Cheech and Chong that just really worked for you two, and that made you like kind of, you know, and really that long lasting iconic duo over the years?
Well, to begin with, uh, it's all ordained. It was all in the stars. It was meant to be. I was one of the things that I love being the country, you know, again, growing up, I would go over to a friend's house. And this friend of mine, he was older. He was more my brother's friend than my friend. And this is, you know, 8, 9, somewhere around there, 10, 11, you know, around that age. And I started having more fun playing with the guy's sisters, the girls. I liked their games better than the guys. Yeah, first of all, I was one of the youngest, and so we were always the young ones. Always took the brunt. We were the target. We were the try it on him. You know, we were treated kind of mean. You know, but the girls, when you played with the girls, it was fun. We played house, where you know I'd pretend I was the dad, and we'd have conversation. We'd just playing make believe, and we'd have build little structures where, you know, that was okay. This is a living room, and it was that make believe game that got me into acting, because the game would go on for all summer. You know, okay, we got to go home for supper, and then okay, see you tomorrow. Are you coming? You know, it was we were back in the day. There was nothing organized, you know, for the family. This is the country, and so it was like, okay, you kids, be home before dark.
Yeah, yeah.
Be home before dark, okay. And they don't want to know what you're doing, because oh my god, that's too scary. And it's country. And so you had little country things to do, you know. We, especially with kids, because once you did your chores, boom, you're free. And so we'd run, and of course we'd run and find other kids, and like we made a the neighborhood. We never had a baseball anything organized or built, you know, nothing league or nothing. With homemade baseball diamond, you know. Okay, this will be home plate, and then we got everything from there. We'd make up shit like that, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so what happened is that I developed this imagination and this ability to write, you know, because we'd play these games and you'd have to improvise as you went, you know. And of course, in some ways, it helped my sex education, because they were older girls, and you got a little bit of thing. But you know what I learned, because I was the middle kid,
Mhm.
and I would walk to school with older girls, and kind of be the fly on the wall.
Uh-huh.
And I'd listen to them with girls, and they would talk about who they thought was cute, and who they thought was, just all that. He's so cute, and it was never the jocks.
Hmm.
Oh, he's such a dick. Ugh, don't like him. But the rebel, the bad kid, the guy with the long hair, the one that no one liked. Oh, he's so cute. He's so cute. And so years went by, and I developed this sort of thing. And then when Elvis Presley hit, like I said, I was playing music for fun, and I knew a lot of country songs, but I didn't know the words. I know the melody a little bit.
Mhm.
And that really helped me because it never got me into any corner, and so I was always open to learn new things. And that's the other thing about being poor, and you're always learning.
Right.
Here, learn how to, especially in the country,
Mhm.
because you want anything done, you had to do it yourself. There was no one around to do it for you, except the older kid that had access to his father's tools, which I had a friend, and so my whole life was because we were so poor. And then being poor now, like I was in the Salvation Army Home for a few years when I was young, because my dad was he was suffering from some war injuries that he got during the war, and my mother was in the sanitarium because she had TB. And then I got checked out, and I ended up in the hospital for a while. So my whole life was because I had to learn, and I had to do it. And then I found the joy of learning how to do new things.
Mhm.
That was the joy. It wasn't like I got so used to it. I loved it. And every job I got, by the way, was because some kid had to leave, go on vacation or something. Hey, will you take over my paper route? Or will you help me collect money for my paper route? And of course, in the country, you never say no. People need help, you help them. That's
Right.
it. And you don't look for money. There's no pay. You get a meal maybe, or you get some present or something that you've been wanting. You want that old bike? Okay, you do this, and here you got it.
Mhm.
That was that was my life. And so when I met Cheech was kind of raised in the same way.
Mm.
And when I met Cheech, I had started a theater company in a strip bar. Uh, yeah, you see, you do something good, and then people will come to you.
Mhm.
So I started a after hours club, and it wasn't my first, by the way. The first club we had, we blew it because we were too successful, and we never hired the right crew.
Mhm.
And so what it was, a singer who should have been a professional football player, but he hurt his knee, and he was never that big. He was my size, about 5'10", and but he was a phenomenal athlete. He could outrun a horse for 40 yards. That's how
Really?
fast he was. And he was a star. He was a football star, and he couldn't sing that well, but he had the heart and the soul.
Mhm.
And so when we started our band, we just upset everybody in the whole country. In Canada, we had a reputation all over. We got kicked out of Calgary because we were so successful. And so we went. So we're in Vancouver, and now we're looking for. We need another venue. We had a nice venue in Calgary. We had to get out of there, and then and so we found this empty theater, and so I called it the Blues Palace, and it was all dedicated to all the blues acts. And our opening act was I Can Tina Turner. I
Oh
Can Tina,
man.
Yeah.
I Can Tina Turner review. We got him on a Tuesday night for $700, a whole crew,
Wow.
Wow,
every,
that's crazy.
and we packed that joint, and it was hot, smoking. But the trouble was, with the crowd, you got a crowd problems. And so the next morning, the neighbors woke up to find beer bottles littered all over their lawn. And oh my God, it was. And so the city closed us down. The city actually took away our permit. And so we had to open another club, which didn't make it. But so we were given another club, and this one made it. And it was an after hours club. And that's where we eventually got, and my brother, by the way, again, I was all for just making that club work. Didn't give a shit about the money. And as a result, my brother ended up buying about 3 or 4 houses.
Wow.
with the money. And then he ended up buying a sort of a business over in Vancouver Island. And that's where he stayed until he died. And I started with the After Hours Club. Then, because the club was so successful, and this is in a town where clubs were not doing well.
Right.
So my club was an anomaly, and I think I give all the credit to my now wife, but at the time she was just a friend, a girlfriend. But she's still my advisor and a partner. She was my partner for the longest time on the comedy. But she was the one that, with her and the people that, and the singers that we had, that, next thing you know, it was a place to go in Vancouver. And so one time we had all the Motown people, the Supremes came down to see our act.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when that's how we got discovered, and we ended up in Detroit, and then we discovered the Jackson 5, and we had all these great memories and great times. And then the group broke up, or Bobby went, they what do they call it? Cut Bobby from the herd, they cut him off. and he went solo, and then I was stuck with backing up other singers, which I didn't mind, although I'm not like I say, I'm not a guitar player, and so I didn't, with Bobby it was okay, but being just a musician, no, I couldn't do it. So I went back to Canada eventually. I first went to LA, wanted to become a bodybuilder and a songwriter. So I joined.
Yeah, that part's interesting. Bodybuilder.
yeah. I joined Gold's Gym and started writing songs. And then the clubs needed help, so I went back there, and that's when I started the improv club in a strip bar, and that was a genius. We're going to do a movie about it pretty quick. Yeah, that's it.
And that's where you met Cheech, right? I believe I heard that he was delivering carpet.
Yeah, he was trying to make a living. It was the toughest job ever. He was a Mexican, and he was one of the only he was the first Mexican I ever met, and I didn't know he was Mexican. He wouldn't tell anybody. He never told anybody. He was just there. And no one, in Canada, there's so many mixed, there's so many Ukrainians, Italians, every kind of brown person you can think of is there, Chinese, everything. And so Cheech was just one of many. And it wasn't until we got down in LA and we started playing clubs, and this one club we weren't going over too well. And I told Cheech, I said, "You're from here, man. There must be a character you could do." And he said, "Yeah, there is one." And he did it, and it was the Chicano. It was the lowrider.
Yeah, I mean, that's, everybody has their Cheech and Chong impressions. It's kind of crazy how you can put on a voice, right, for yourself. If somebody says like, I don't know, man, like we know instantly, like that's Tommy Chong. You guys are costumes. If somebody puts on, a red bandana and another guy standing next to him with the little red beanie, we know exactly, who that is.
Yeah, mine goes straight there.
Yeah. Well, that was, that was Cheech and Chong. It was, like I say, so serendipity, because what are the odds of me meeting Cheech in Canada? What are the odds that he wasn't, acting or comedy or anything? Like you said, he was delivering carpets, but he was a writer. He was writing articles for a hippie magazine. Cheech is very intelligent, and so he was in, and then he became like a reviewer, so he could get into all the concerts free. And just he had his press credentials, and so he'd go everywhere, and he'd have record companies send him the latest album, and so he could review it, and then he would sell the album to the record stores, and that's how he made a little extra money, a little eating money.
Yeah.
Because he was up there getting out of the war, so he lost his deferment, and they're ready to stick his ass into the war, Vietnam War, and that's why he ended up in Canada.
Oh.
Back when he was down here, because I would always be fucking with Cheech, and I'd say, you get on stage and say, any FBI people here tonight? Cheech would say, shut up, that's not funny, man.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't even think about that, how different the times were and people were being drafted and everything. We didn't live through that, so we don't know that.
Oh, you had no idea. Yeah, that's where the times, man. But you see, we live in a physical universe, and chaos is part of this universe, and confusion and chaos and change. It's all about change. And this is how you learn, this is how you evolve, this is how you develop, And that's why, they depict heaven as sitting on a cloud with a harp, And that's not too far off, because I figured it out. And I've been telling people on podcasts that I figured out a couple of things. I figured out eternity. People, it's hard to wrap their head around eternity. When did this all begin? So what it is, the definition of eternity is that there's no endings, there's only beginnings.
Yeah.
And that's when you get your head wrapped around that, it makes sense. Because nothing really ends, it just changes.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like when you die, you don't disappear. You do disappear. Your body is no use. It was just it was a used car anyway, it was a rental. But your soul, which is eternal, and not only eternal, but it's unique. There's no two people anywhere in the universe alike. No. We are all separate, unique individuals, just like the cells in our body. And there's positive and negative, like electricity. And that's what we are. We're positive and negative. And that's why there's horrors in the world. Why? Because it's the opposite of paradise. It's the opposite of, you have opposites. And that's that. And what you have to, and what the wise men have done is they've recognized it, but they also recognize the fact that they got to be very selective in how they share their knowledge, because everybody's here to learn. And because you only learn from your mistakes, the bigger mistakes, the bigger the lesson. And that's why we've been taught to love your neighbor, regardless of what they're going through. And if they hate you, love your neighbor, love your enemies. And then what happens is that you end up with no enemies. You know what I mean?
What a concept, huh?
Yeah, you love them. Because what is an enemy other than a friend that feels like he's been somehow disrespected or robbed by you?
Mhm.
And if it's true, then you forgive them. And that's where forgiveness comes. And now this is just advice only for those that are ready to take it,
Mhm.
because there's so many. Because can you imagine telling Tyson, Mike Tyson, love your enemies before he gets in a ring with somebody?
Right.
He'll love them after.
Afterwards is fine. Yeah.
After, and they're great. I'm watching. I've been studying the boxing, and I'm watching. I'm watching one show where Tyson's on with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman,
Oh.
and they're all talking, and everybody had beaten everybody,
Uh-huh.
on this thing, and they all agree that Muhammad Ali was the greatest.
Right.
Yeah, they all agree with that one,
Mhm.
but Muhammad Ali also suffered the same defeat that they all did too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah,
We
so
we uh
they're
we
all
re-
equal.
we wrestled in high school, so we know that whole thing about balance and loving your enemy and things like that. I saw a clip of you on like I guess it was like a dating show kind of parody type of thing. Why did you remember the name of it?
Oh,
Like a dating it was like the dating game.
It
Like
was a
where
yeah,
you
mating game. Yeah, it was a
it was
skit.
on. It was on Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
Okay, now at the end of it, you throw a pretty sweet headlock
Oh
throw.
yeah,
Did
oh
you
yeah,
wrestle? Because I saw your footwork and I'm like, man, he probably knew his way around, some
yeah.
grappling because it looked
oh
like
yeah.
you knew how to throw it.
Oh well, that's how we worked out when we were kids.
Ah,
We would wrestle. I had a friend, and I found out later that he was gay, but he would come over to the house just to fight. And we would fight for hours, wrestle, fight for hours. Not mean, but just like, and when it got someone gave up or someone said, okay, that's enough, we'd stop, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how you worked out. There was no weights in. But you
uh-huh.
get a guy in a headlock, and I had a girlfriend, or she wasn't a girlfriend, she was a friend, but her brothers were all wrestling freaks, and so
Ah,
they taught me all these wrestling holds and different holds. I showed my son that one, and oh my god, you know that one where they get you in a headlock. If they get you in a headlock and then you pick them up and you fall backwards,
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you pile drive them.
Uh-huh. Like a suplex, yeah.
Yeah, and I taught my son that, and he did it to his friend and almost broke his neck.
I
Oh
almost
man.
broke I almost
Yeah,
broke Whitey's neck one time.
yeah, he full we had the wrestling mats out and he decides to do a full vertical suplex. And like an idiot as a kid, I'm like, he's not gonna really go back here, And then all of a sudden we start
Wow.
teetering. I'm like, this is happening. And I felt like four freaking like pops.
Eh.
I had to
Oh,
check everything out after that, but I'm sure like, there's some lasting damage there that I just don't know about yet.
oh yeah. Well, when we did that show, I told the stunt guy, I said, listen, I'm, the actor. I said, let's really fight. Don't fake it. I'm going to really try to take you down. And he said, okay, got it. And so he did everything he could. But yeah, when you're kids, there are certain holds, you get into it, you get that headlock, but then you got to know how to get it or use it.
Yeah.
And
I was impressed. That was a real throw, full rotation of the hips and everything. I'm like, that's not fake.
No, yeah, all that whole thing looked real. I had to do a double take there. I'm like,
well, that was the great thing about the bit, because Dick Clark, we told everybody we're not telling anybody what's going on, so it'll be a surprise. We told the cameraman knew, and
oh man.
that was so. It was Raider record. It started a lot of things. It started that surprise, where you like all the producers, they want to know what's going on. They want to know everything. But if you hold it back, just tell the right people, and make sure
Yeah.
you get this. Well, that's how we did our movies.
Mhm.
That's why our movies were so good, because I'm looking. I saw a few now, a few clips, and I saw the rawness. It was so raw because it wasn't slick. We wouldn't rehearse. we would just come in there and do, and usually the first take and say, okay, that's good. That's why we shot Up in Smoke in less than a month.
Huh.
Less than a month, and for less than $1 million.
Wow.
It was like $800,000. It's unheard of.
That's unheard. Yeah, it's unheard of. Yeah.
And for a reason too, because you can't make a living making those kind of movies. The crew and everybody else, man, they're poverty. The only people making money are the filmmaker or the movie houses.
Uh-huh. Now, at the very top, I mentioned, how busy you're kind of keeping these days and whatnot. Before we get out of here, I do want to mention you got some things going on, right? And Whitey and I just checked out that '90s show. You still got a lot of comedy shows coming up, right? What have you got going on these days?
We're struggling with we're supposed to be going private or public with the Cheech and Chong cannabis. And we're very close to that happening. And we're also, my CBD line is really taken off. And it's doing it really, really incredible, actually, because we're getting closer and closer to, having it legal everywhere. And once that happens, it's going, because they're finding out, what they found out? Oh, they did a placebo test with marijuana, and they're trying to diss it. They're trying, we did a placebo test and we found out that there was no difference between placebo and cannabis, meaning that everything that cures you with the cannabis is in your mind. It's not a chemical reaction. And that tells you everything. There's no one special, whatever, THC or CBD or whatever it is. It's the whole thing combined that affects the pain, because pain management starts with the brain. Your brain controls everything. And if the cannabis calms the brain to the point where that you lose the pain, like I'm talking migraines, I'm talking back pain, leg pain, a lot of that pain, it's due to stress. And what does cannabis do? Relieves the stress. And so we're it's coming to the point where that I am really planning on. I think I'm going to be either one of the rich. I'll definitely be one of the richest men in the world. Wow. Eventually, coming. It's coming to that point, and when I do, as I get to that point, I've got plans how to use the wealth. You see, wealth is a tool. It's a tool, and if it's not used properly, it can be so negative. Like guys that have won the lottery, for instance. A lot of them put a shitload of money in the trunk of their car and they go to a strip bar. and that's their idea of a good time.
And there goes that, right?
And it doesn't take long because if you don't use it, you lose it. You see, it's very, everything is active, everything's alive. You may think it's dormant, but it's alive. That's why Bernie Madoff ripped off all those people, because he had them thinking that all you have to do is give me your money and I'll double it and triple it, and you don't have to worry about anything. And so they go, oh, okay, Bernie. And so they give him all their money, and then he uses it, he spends it, he loses it. He's a liar.
Yep.
And so I think if I've got plans for how to improve the world, and we will evolve to that point, and it could be me. It could be I could be the guy that steers the ship in the right way, because we're coming into a time of peace and prosperity.
Right.
And the only problem with peace and prosperity is people get used to the status quo. They get used to having, no problems. They get used to doing things, And that's why slavery was around for so long. People are so used to their slaves, and then the slaves get used to their comfort. And it's only the offspring that go, this ain't wrong. This ain't right, And that's why so many rich kids will go off and be race car drivers or, some death-defying thing, because other than that, they got nothing to live for. Everything's done for them, And so they need excitement in your life, because that's what life is all about. We're here to learn. We're here to learn. We're not here to just sit on our ass and just count our money, We're here to use that money. There's so many things you can do with money, so many creative things, and so many, like I got a plan where I want to do a movie series of the march, the migration in South America, where the people came. They marched 1,000 miles, 1,300 miles. And then they got stuck at the border in El Paso or somewhere down there, and they're stuck there. Well, I would like to hire all those marchers and bring them across with a movie, working in the movie company, and have them employees of a movie company called Peace Pipe Pictures. And pay them for their story, and then educate them and house them. We get them in the unions and make their march worthwhile, because that's a hell of an audition to me. You march with carrying a kid. I want them in my country. That's the kind of people I want working for me, because they're dedicated and they're super people. Now you do that. And then the other plan I got, this is crazy. And in fact, it's too crazy to tell you. It's crazy.
That's fine.
I better ease up on that.
Well, we'll see it when it comes to fruition, right?
Yeah. Then you say, "Oh man, that's the crazy one he was telling me about."
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what you got planned.
Now, Whitey, before we get out of here, Whitey, is there anything else you wanted to say or throw out there? I know we have a few more minutes with Mr. Chong here. Anything you want to throw out there before we end it, Whitey?
Man, there was like a billion questions I had, but I'm just like super glad that you got the chance to talk to us, and I was glad to hear a lot of your early stories. I mean, like, I feel like not a lot of people get to hear that kind of stuff, and
it's something I've been mulling over, arguing with Cheech over, because he has a tendency to he's a Chicano, and he has the ability to invent scenarios.
We do.
It's the Mexican or the Spanish race, because they're the best singers, best entertainers, actors, everything is because you're so even the language itself, it's so innovative, and it's so they call it the romantic thing, and it has that thing and that whole thing about it, and that's why Cheech, had another partner before Cheech, but he was a nice guy. He was a boring Canadian, He was like, we knew what he had in mind, and but we were raised. But Cheech was like ready for any adventure when I met him, and he still is, the Spanish, remember they all used to speak with a lisp.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the reason is because the king spoke with a list.
Mm.
And so and if you spoke with a list, then everybody thought, oh, you're from the court. And so as a result, the whole Spanish world was speaking with a list. It became a thing.
Yeah, like well, for example, like we say chorizo, right? When we're talking about like the sausages, and in Spain they say chorizo with with the list.
Yeah, with the list. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And when you think about, oh man, that's so polite. you know, instead of making fun of the guy, you say, okay, but that's what it is. Then we all speak like that.
It just jumped right on board.
I love the culture. But I love everywhere I go. I just love the people and the culture. There's so much to learn, man.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so much fun being an earthling.
Now, we could probably go hours and hours and hours. I know you got to get out of here, and I really do appreciate it, man. It would probably be even just it would be a whole nother hours or so. Talking about the bullshit and hypocrisy around your incarceration. But the only thing I want to say about that, really quickly,
simple thing. It was a blessing.
Yeah, and
it was a blessing. I had a choice. Mm-hmm. We all have choices. Mm-hmm. And I made that choice. I said, oh, well, it was made for me, by the way. It was very serendipity, because growing up, I met, in fact, like I said, we're very poor, but when my dad finally got it together to get a wartime house, because it was like he'd been in the army, and we got access to we got possession of a wartime house. With indoor plumbing, and it was all of that. But we had enough room, and we always had boarders. See, when you're poor, you always got someone living with you because they got nowhere else to stay, and you're the last resort. And like we had foster kids. So many kids. We take care of our daughter for a while. I got to go here for a while. I'm going to be gone, maybe in jail or whatever. And we had foster kids and everything else. And one time, I met a guy at a party, and he had nowhere to stay, and he had just gotten out of jail. And then he gave me all the jailhouse stories. In fact, he gave me a tattoo. I can't show it to you right now, but it's I didn't know what it was. I'll show it to you. It's a white supremacy tattoo.
Ooh. Dang.
Oh man.
I had no idea. See it?
Oh,
yeah,
geez. With the eagle and everything. Oh man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A biker one time at a radio station, he goes, "Hey, that's a white supremacy tattoo."
Oh,
jeez.
Anyway, I knew that eventually I would be experiencing jail. I knew it. It was just, I could feel it, and there was excitement. And by the way, I had one bad half hour in jail, just a bad half. The first night I was there, I was getting into the bunk. I got into the bunk, and it was so small. It was my first time, and I came from a big king-size bed in the Palisades, and I got a little bunk, and I'm laying against a brick wall. And I thought, and then I heard the door being locked, the big key would clicking that big dormitory door shut. And I started panicking, and then I guess it was the Spirit, the Holy Ghost came and said, okay, it's cool. It's going to be okay, Tom. You're going to enjoy this. Relax. And I went to sleep. And next thing you know, I woke up in the morning, 5 a.m. Garcia, report to the kitchen immediately. And I woke up. I'm in jail. And then it was fun. It was so much fun after that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You have a good attitude about it, but again, that's a completely different story. I heard about it on the Joe Rogan podcast and whatnot. But the one thing I'll say about that, the whole situation is that I think it's just really kind of ironic how you were incarcerated for selling bongs of all things, and these days the government hands out drug paraphernalia, needles, and things like that to people, and there's no problem with it.
No. No, it showed you the corruption of the government itself. That was Bush and Ashcroft. Bush was very, very, very corrupt, and so was Ashcroft. And I was like a thorn in their side. I was walking around. They were looking for some hippie action. That Nixon had, and they never had any. And mine, they sentenced me on 9/11. That was my sentencing day. Oh no, that was my court date. Went to court on 9/11, and then they moved the trial into a huge space, thinking there was going to be a lot of protest and everything else. And one guy showed up and it had a sign saying "Free marijuana," and it was a stoner sign. Was he giving it away free, or was he trying to make a statement?
I mean, of all people to pick on, though, I mean, and I don't think there's anybody who said like, "What, this is just it's Tommy Chong."
It was their worst nightmare. They had no idea. They had no idea. The lady that prosecuted me. She had told me before, you'll probably get house arrest. And Mary Beth Buchanan. Well, she's no longer in the business. Period. She tried to run for. She lost her job at the State Department or wherever she was, and she tried to run for a Republican seat, and the Democrats, they paid to have me come just to be there, and just to be there to do interviews. And she lost by a landslide. And they asked her, and she said, "I wish I had given Tommy Chong more time."
Well, we all wish for more Tommy Chong time, and so this brings us to an end here. And I really want to thank you. I was appreciate it. I think we had a lot of fun with the whole thing, and I really look forward to everything else you still got in motion, even though you're up there in age and experience. Like I said, you span you span 7 decades with your career in entertainment. So again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure, guys. And anytime I'm available. So
yeah,
I love to talk. You can find you got that hint, huh?
Yeah, we could probably do a part 2, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Super great to talk to you.
Take care.
All
See you later.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.